beg to move this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Jessica Morden.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm back on. I'm very grateful to Mr Speaker and yourself for having granted this debate on exactly the night when the Newport Rising took place 185 years ago. A night on which thousands of working people from across South Wales valleys marched on the Westgate Hotel in my constituency in the fight for the vote and the right of ordinary people to have their voices heard. Earlier this evening at Newport Cathedral, the annual commemoration took place at the unmarked graves of 10 of more than 20 Chartists who lost their lives that night. And I'm so grateful for my friend and neighbour, the Honourable Member for Newport West and Isloin, for covering the other end of the M4 tonight, and for being there and saying some lovely things, I hear. The Newport Rising was the last armed rebellion against authority in Britain, and we are really proud of our Chartists and proud of the role that they played in shaping our modern democracy. I've called this debate tonight to honour the sacrifice of our local heroes, the Gwent Chartists, who remind us that the freedoms and democratic rights we enjoy today were secured by ordinary men and women. This comes on the eve of the US elections and when democracy feels fragile around the world, and when faith in politics in this country is low, and it is incumbent on our new Labour government to work to restore that faith in the way we act and in the reforms that we propose. I will give way.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I commend the Honourable Lady for bringing this forward for Newport East and for the occasion for it as well and the importance of it as she's expressed. As a proud working class man myself, I'm so thankful for the members of the Newport Chartists who did what good men do to secure democracy, put it all on the line. And does the Honourable Lady not agree that their steps brought forward the battle for a vote for all that we often take for granted today, and that we need to educate our children about the battle for the chance to vote, to instil the mentality that voting is a privilege fought for with blood, sweat and tears?
I thank the Honourable Member for that intervention, and I couldn't have put it better myself. And I thank other Honourable Members for turning up this evening, which it seems to be quite a popular debate for an end-of-day adjournment debate at 10 o'clock on a Monday night, and for that I am most grateful. The Chartist movement of the 1830s and 40s, the first mass working class movement, was born in part out of unhappiness with the Great Reform Act of 1832. Passed on the third time of asking by the pro-reform Whig government, the Act was limited in its ambition to extend the franchise and ultimately left most working class people still without the right to vote. The grassroots campaign behind the push for reform in the early 1830s included organised working and middle class groups who advocated for widening the right to vote to all taxpaying men and more, but it disbanded following the passage of the disappointing Great Reform Act. Those undelivered demands for reform would go on to form part of the People's Charter, from which Chartism derives its name. I will give way.
I thank her for giving way. Does she agree with me that if the Charter was drawn today, it would include having proportional voting systems to elect members of this House?
Well, I won't be drawn on that particular question from the Honourable Member which you made tonight, although I would reflect on the fact that in Wales we have a partially proportional system. This wasn't a movement based on ideologies or theories, but on the sense of disconnect between the lives and unaddressed struggles of working people and the lives of those purporting to represent them. Their demands were simple: that all men over 21 have the vote, that voting should take place by secret ballot, that constituencies should be of equal size, that members of Parliament should be paid, that property qualification for becoming a member should be abolished, and that parliamentary elections be held every year. Gulp. The Chartists put together a petition to Parliament with these demands in June 1839. This petition travelled to organised branches and meetings across the country, gathering 1,280,000 signatures. It ended up measuring almost 3 miles long. Can I give way to another Honourable Member? I give way.
Thank you. I'm very grateful to my honourable friend, for securing the debate and giving way. And with her permission, I'd like to place on record a commemoration of events in Birmingham in 1839, when reaction and the gathering radicalism, which first found expression in the Birmingham Political Union, which did so much to shape the People's Charter, combined and ignited into the Bullring riots, which led to soldiers patrolling the streets as far south as my constituency. Such was the fear that the contagion would spread. 185 years later, when people are still protesting and dying for their political rights, from Ukraine to Iran, does she agree that the spirit that motivated Chartism remains living, immediate and essential?
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention. I'm so glad he managed to mention the Birmingham Political Union. It was in my original draft, but I knew with interventions I wouldn't have time to mention them, and I agree wholeheartedly with the points that he makes. Despite all this, the first petition was rejected by 235 votes to 46, leading to fury and unrest across the country, including in Newport. In November of that year, John Frost, a Draper town councillor, magistrate and briefly the mayor of Newport, led thousands of Chartist sympathisers from across the South Wales valleys on a march down to Newport. The Chartists marched in 3 columns from 3 directions, one from Blackwood, one from Nantiglow and another from Pontypool, with a plan to take the town at dawn. Scuppered by heavy rain, a planned meeting in Rogerstone was delayed and Jones and his men from Pontypool never arrived. As a result, the final march into Newport happened in daylight hours, with the men arriving around 9:30 a.m. As actor Julian Lewis-Jones told Newport marchers on Saturday night, uncertain of what awaited them, they faced muskets and bayonets, the cold sting of the night and the loom threat of death. Even in the face of all this, they marched. They marched because they believed in something greater than themselves, the right of every person to be heard, the right to shape their own destiny, the right to vote. Stories of their journeys are few and far between, but we know it was wet and cold. Their boots squelched on the waterlogged ground, their rain-soaked coats clinging to weary shoulders. Each of these men were ordinary people, miners, farmers, artisans, labourers, driven by their cause.
For my honourable
Thank you.
Madam Deputy Speaker, would the honourable member agree with me that we should be thanking and be grateful to his academic historians and lay historians who have kept the Chartist history alive, like my uncle Les James?
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend in commending Les James, and I spent much of my afternoon on Saturday afternoon with Chartist historians, and it's great that my honourable friend mentions Les. On the way down through the Gwent valleys into the town centre, some of the Chartists were arrested and detained at the Westgate Hotel in the centre of Newport. This spurred on Chartists from nearby industrial towns, many of whom were armed with the intent of freeing their fellow Chartists. I'll give way.
Thank you so much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And not many in this House may know that, in fact, at the time of the Newport Rising, Newport was actually part of Monmouthshire at that time. So we have very strong links between our constituencies. And would my honourable friend agree that this Labour government is continuing the great work of strengthening our democracy by giving the votes to 16 and 17-year-olds, as the Welsh Labour government already has done in Wales?
Thank you to my lovely neighbour and honourable friend next door, and I'm coming on to make that point, and I absolutely agree. When they arrived at the Westgate, a firefight ensued between the marchers and soldiers deployed to protect the hotel. No one knows who fired the first shot. More than 20 Chartists were shot and killed, with dozens more injured. 10 of the bodies lie to this day in unmarked graves around the site of the Newport Cathedral. The 3 leaders of the Newport Rising, John Frost, William Jones and Zephaniah Williams, were arrested, tried for treason and sentenced to death. They'd intended to inspire a domino effect of uprisings across the country and were regarded as working-class heroes and martyrs. Following outcry from the public and even from the Lord Chief Justice, the 3 Chartist leaders' death sentences were later commuted to transportation for life to Australia. Frost would eventually be unconditionally pardoned, receiving a triumphant welcome back to Newport on his return, and continued to campaign for democratic reform until his death in 1877. Eventually, 5 of the 6 demands set out in the People's Charter were delivered. I'm sure parliamentary colleagues and our constituents alike will be pleased, following our experience of facing 4 general elections in 9 years, that the 6th, the prospect of annual elections, was not carried carried forward. We are proud of our Chartist heritage. I probably ought to make some progress in order to let the Minister in, but thank you. We are proud of our Chartist heritage in Newport. It is always particularly moving to join political colleagues from all across Newport and constituents of all ages and all backgrounds for the annual commemoration. This year was absolutely no different. After a day of events in Newport City Centre this last Saturday and the annual Chartist Convention at the Cathedral, which I had the pleasure of chairing in the afternoon, more than 1,500 people joined the Newport Rising March, flaming torches held high, and they are quite scary, following down in the footsteps of the Chartists from Bellevue Park down Stow Hill to the West Gate before heading to a night of Chartist-themed performances from Reality Theatre at the Cab and a night of live music at the Corn Exchange with Adwife. Newport Rising Festival. This is the Newport Rising Festival, which is a real highlight of Newport's calendar. And a huge thanks to the Newport Rising Group, particularly David Daniels and Melinda Jowley and our Chartist Heritage Charity for their work on putting on the programme. It seems to grow every year, and the group have a permanent hub now in our city centre. But the Chartist heritage doesn't just belong to Newport. There's a mini exhibition of Chartist history on the corridor just down there on the way to the public gallery. There you'll see a photo of John Frost taken shortly after his return to the UK from Australia after having been pardoned. Can I echo at this point the call made by the late great Paul Flynn, former member for Newport West, who regularly bemoaned the lack of representation of working class and progressive movements and their history in this palace. In a business question in 2011, he said, certain elements in our constitution are well represented in the Palace of Westminster with statues, portraits, stained glass windows, but there's almost a total absence of memorials to progressive groups such as the Chartists that did so much to shape the best in our modern democracy. And perhaps, Madam Deputy Speaker, we might take the opportunity around the 185th anniversary of the Newport Rising to ensure that those lesser celebrated parts of our heritage are reflected among the many wonders we have across the Parliamentary estate. Oh, I will. Go on then.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank you for bringing this debate forward tonight so we can pay a special tribute to the role that Wales has played in forming our democracy over the years. But is she not concerned that the proposed new system for elections in Wales, whereby one vote will return 6 Senedd members, threatens to undermine the spirit of democracy as the Chartists understood it?
I'm sure it's not. I'm not going to be drawn into talking about the Welsh elections in this debate tonight, but it's a system that has been devised by the Welsh Senedd and voted on, and I'm sure it's one in which people will be able to participate fully when the elections come in 2026. The message of the Chartists is more important than ever, especially today on the eve of the US elections and amidst global turmoil. We witnessed Russia's invasion of Ukraine, electoral uncertainty in Moldova, and increasing threats to Taiwan from China and more. Threats to democracy globally are manifesting in different ways, but all combining to make people feel that politics and democracy can't fix anything. Yet having our say, from voting to engaging with our politicians or taking part in public consultations or demonstrating, does matter and does make a difference. We live in a world today where more people than at any time in history are able to have a say on who makes the rules. And as all of us who sit in this place say, every vote counts, every vote can make a difference. I know the Foreign Secretary and his ministers will hold to account and take action against those who seek to cynically undermine and degrade the integrity of the democracies around the world, including our own, to support those fighting to protect them. But closer to home, Madam Deputy Speaker, 185 years on, it was working people once again who this summer, using those same hard-won rights, returned a majority of Labour MPs in each nation and region of Great Britain to deliver a government determined to change our country. For the first time in 14 years, I am proud to be part of a Labour Party of government in Westminster, which over the course of the next 5 years will deliver on our manifesto promises to double down on the Chartist legacy, to strengthen our democracy in the interests of working people, and to restore public trust in politics as a force for good. This will be a government award. I'll give way one last time.
Thank you very much. You're very kind. The Honourable Lady, I should say, first of all, epitomises exactly the very thing that the Newport Charter stood for, and I congratulate her on that. But the thing that the Honourable Lady referred to is it affected everywhere in the United Kingdom. the people of Northern Ireland realised that working class rights were something that they should try to achieve as well. So what people did in Newport meant the same for us in Northern Ireland. Thank you.
I agree, and I thank the honourable member for making that point. This will be a government that responds to the struggles of working people and does not duck the necessary, though difficult, decisions for fear of being unpopular. This is a government that will follow the example set by our Welsh Labour government by extending the right to vote in all elections to 16 and 17-year-olds, because if you can leave school, work full-time, join the army, you can be trusted to have your say in your country's future. It is a government that has already introduced the House of Lords Bill to remove hereditary peers, because power should not be the inherent right of a select aristocratic few. A government that will establish an independent ethics and integrity commission, strengthen the role of an independent advisor on ministerial standards, update the ministerial code, modernise and reform the House of Commons procedures, ban MP second jobs, and is addressing the inconsistencies in voter ID rules that prevent people from voting, and an election bill. I am proud that the last Labour government brought in devolution to Wales and Scotland, and it is significant that for the first time in 14 years we have a UK Prime Minister committed not to the failed Tory experiment of muscular unionism, but returning powers to those with skin in the game, more directly answerable and more intimately connected to local people and their needs, and to working as a Labour government in Westminster with, rather than against, our Welsh Labour government to deliver for the people of Wales, and that is a big change. Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, if the Chartists taught us anything, it was that Westminster does not always know best. I also want to warmly welcome the private members' bill of my honourable friend, the member for Edinburgh North and Leith, which would bring consistency in voter registration by enabling Welsh and Scottish governments to allow online applications for proxy and postal votes in other elections. It would be good to hear from the Minister tonight to give more detail on its plan to strengthen the integrity of elections and encourage wider participation. Our constituents would expect no less from a United Kingdom than for national and regional leaders to work together to change our country and build a better future. The establishment of the Council of Nations and Regions is a very welcome step to ensure that and while we're delivering our commitments to push power out of Westminster, we do not repeat the mistakes of devolve and forget. Can the Minister reassure me that this new engagement framework will be regular and reliable and will not fade with time as it did under the last government? So, on this 185th anniversary of the Newport Rising, let us remember the legacy they left us. A vote, a voice, and more than that, a vision for the future that challenges us to protect these freedoms and use them powerfully, use them to confront injustice, build unity and keep hope alive for all. Let us make sure that this new Labour government carries forward the 19th century Gwent Chartist legacy in delivering these important reforms to make our democracy fit for the 21st century. And I will be proud, as the member for Newport East, to support them.
Minister Rushanara Ali.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I will start by thanking my honourable friend, the member for Newport East, for securing this debate and for her work in promoting the democratic rights of both of her constituents and the wider public, and for bringing this very important debate to the House. On this day, as she has said, in 1839, 185 years ago, protests erupted in Newport when up to 5,000 Chartists marched on the town to demand fair voting rights. The Chartist movement emerged in 1836 among working class men who felt disappointed by the 1832 Reform Act, which had not extended the vote beyond those who owned property. And it quickly spread around the country, with men who felt disenfranchised by the democratic systems of the time and wanted an equal vote to those who owned property. And I know here in London, men were inspired to join the movement. The Newport Rising ended tragically, as my honourable friend pointed out, with up to 24 Chartists being killed and over 50 more wounded. And today we remember the efforts of the Chartists to advance the widen participation in our democracy, as do the people of Newport, who celebrate in the Newport Rising Festival every year. While the movement was strongest between 1838 and 1848, its legacy and ambitions were lasting. Further reforms passed in 1867 and 1884, and by 1918, 5 of the 6 Chartist demands, as my honourable friend pointed out, were achieved. We owe, Madam Deputy Speaker, a huge debt of gratitude to the Chartists, as well as to those who followed in their footsteps, for the work they did to build our democratic system, which is admired around the world. The South Wales Chartists were renowned for their efforts during the Newport Rising, as my honourable friend has eloquently pointed out, and they highlighted the long-awaited need for change. I give way to the honourable.
I thank her for giving way. Would she agree with me that one of the long-awaited needs for change that there is reform to the upper house here, and that we are long overdue a fully elected chamber?
Rushanara Ali.
I thank the honourable member. He will know that the last Labour government was the government that began the reform in the Lords, and we have set out our plans in our manifesto. Madam Deputy Speaker, as I was saying, the Chartists tirelessly fought for all men over 21, irrespective of status, to have the vote, something which was not supported by any legislation at the time. And it is impossible to speak of these achievements without also recognising the efforts of the suffragette movement. They have been an inspiration not only to women in the UK, but to women across the world. We wouldn't be here without their courage and sacrifice. They fought tirelessly for women's right to vote and participate in our democracy. The right to democratic participation is a defining aspect of our great nation. Just as the Chartists and the suffragette movements helped to secure democracy and democratic freedoms at home, so too has Britain played a vital role in promoting these freedoms abroad, particularly where they've been under threat. And during, of course, the Second World War, we stood by our allies in Europe who were threatened by authoritarianism. And today, as has been mentioned, we are supporting our allies in Ukraine who are fighting to protect their own democracy and freedom. And we have advocated building the democratic institutions which are inclusive, effective and enduring. And I know from my own family's experience of the birth of Bangladesh the important role this Parliament has played in speaking out for the democratic freedoms of people in other countries, like in my country of birth, in the War of Independence in 1971. I'm afraid I've got to conclude in just a few minutes, apologies. This government will continue to promote our cherished democratic principles and values. The government will continue to ensure that we enfranchise those who are aged 16 and 17, as has been set out in our manifesto. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chartist movement reminds us about the importance of giving voice to those who do not have one. That is why we are expanding the electoral franchise to enable young people to participate in our vibrant democracy. That is not all we want to do. Our manifesto commitments include improving voter registration rates and protecting the security of our democracy. We are committed to ensuring that all who are entitled to vote are able to do so. This means making sure all legitimate, secure forms of identification are accepted at polling stations. And to this end, we have recently brought forward legislation to add the Armed Forces Veteran Card to the list of accepted identifications, further supporting our veterans to successfully participate in our democracy. I'd like to make some more progress because there's quite a lot to cover. In addition to these aims, our ongoing review of the 2024 general election will help to establish what went well and any further improvements which need to be made. And overall, the priorities of this government are centred on the commitment to strengthen the integrity of elections and encourage wider participation in the democratic process, ensuring that every eligible voter can participate in our democracy with confidence. Madam Deputy Speaker, in closing, I want to thank my honourable friend for Newport East for securing today's important debate, and to all members who've contributed. And today we look back at the significance of the Chartists and the events in Newport on the 4th of November 1839 in shaping our democracy. And at a time, as my honourable friend has pointed out, when democracies face huge pressures around the world, we draw inspiration from the Chartists and from Newport Rising for their fight for our democratic freedoms. I will give way to him.
I'm really grateful to the Minister for giving way, and I want to congratulate genuinely the government on some of these progressive changes that they're making to extend the franchise, because as Edmund Burke said in the 18th century, to conserve, you have to reform. And I think it's probably fair that some of the members on these benches here would do well to be here this evening to hear about some of these progressive reforms that this government is making.
Well, I'm grateful to the honourable member for the point he makes. He's absolutely right. It's quite striking to not see a single member in the opposite benches. But I'm really encouraged to see the attendance of honourable members and my honourable friends here this late into the evening. And I want to pay tribute to the work that members of Parliament do to talk to young people in their constituents. I know every Friday and most Fridays we visit schools in our constituencies and talk to them about this House and, of course, our democratic institutions. And I think that's really important. The role of school councils, the role of young mayors, really powerful in engaging citizens in our democracy. The role of citizenship education that the last Labour government introduced in teaching young people about our institutions is vital. So we all have a collective responsibility to make sure that we implant the knowledge and respect and awareness of our democratic traditions, our history, our heritage, the sacrifices of the Chartists, of the suffragettes, and the many others who've built our democracy and who've inspired other democracies around the world, that we protect our systems, our democratic traditions, and our institutions. And that is the commitment of this government, that we will work hard to protect our democracy, to strengthen our democracy, to make sure it's resilient, to make sure it's constantly evolving, of course, as we've said, in terms of the actions we are taking to ensure that as there is the need to modernise, that happens, and some of that is in relation to the voter registration points that I made earlier. And I hope that as we move forward and look at further actions we take, that there is ongoing engagement with members across the House and, of course, my honourable friend. And I pay tribute to her for securing this debate, because I think it's really important that we share with not only our own citizens, but others around the world, the great traditions and the great achievements of people in the past, and particularly the Chartists, as well as the suffragettes, in what they have given us, the precious gift of the freedoms that we enjoy now. And we have to hold that, we have to make sure that we do everything to build on what has been achieved by the Chartists and by those incredible movements. And in that spirit, I look forward to working with colleagues to make sure that as we go forward, we continue to strengthen our democracy. Thank you.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Order, order.